The Roman Empire, a civilization that once ruled over 1/5 of humanity, a colossal power stretching from the scorching sands of Egypt all the way to the misty, rain-soaked forests of Britain. Its influence was immense, shaping everything from law and architecture to politics, and even the very languages many of us speak today. But behind the gleaming marble statues and the stories of glorious battlefield victories, a darker truth was always lurking. A blueprint for how absolute power can lead to absolute corruption. Because in Rome, it seems every single triumph carried within it the seed of its own decay. Let's rewind. Rome's story didn't start with an empire. It began as a humble city-state, a small settlement with an insatiable, infinite hunger for more. Through relentless warfare, iron-willed discipline, and sheer, raw ambition, Rome built a machine of power that was completely unmatched in the ancient world. At the very heart of this machine was a surprisingly simple, yet brutal idea: Pax Romana, Roman peace. But this wasn't a peace of equals. It was peace through dominance. When Rome's legions arrived at your doorstep, you were offered a choice: join the empire and reap its benefits, or be utterly crushed by it. The Romans weren't just conquerors, they were master builders. They didn't just fight, they constructed an entire world. They laid down thousands of miles of roads connecting the empire like a nervous system. They established legal codes that brought a sense of order to chaos. They built magnificent baths, temples, and aqueducts, the very infrastructure of an empire that promised stability and prosperity. But there was always a catch, an unspoken rule. All of this was yours as long as you obeyed. Rome gave with one hand and held a sword in the other. But as any student of history knows, power rarely stays pure for long. Once Rome had conquered the known world, the real battle began. And this war wasn't fought on some distant frontier. It was fought right inside its own walls, in the hallowed halls of the Senate and the shadowy back alleys of the city. Power is a magnet, attracting those who crave it most, and Rome was no exception. As wealth from conquered lands flooded into the city, Roman politics devolved into a kind of bizarre, high-stakes theater. Ambitious senators openly bought votes to secure their positions. Power-hungry generals used gold to bribe their soldiers, ensuring their loyalty was to them, not the state. The very republic that once prided itself on concepts like virtue and civic duty had transformed into a sprawling marketplace of influence where everything and everyone had a price. The great philosopher and statesman Cicero saw the writing on the wall. He warned, "The arrogance of power is the worst kind of corruption." A powerful statement, but very few were listening. The lure of wealth and control was simply too strong. Then came the moment of no return. In 49 BCE, Julius Caesar, a brilliant and ambitious general, led his army across the Rubicon River, effectively declaring war on the Senate. This single act was a clear, unambiguous message to the world. The Republic was dead. And in its place, something new and far more autocratic rose from the ashes. An emperor, the first of many men who would be treated as gods on earth, under the rule of the first emperor. Augustus, Rome entered what is often called its golden age. It was a time of relative peace, unprecedented prosperity, and the construction of monumental buildings that seemed to touch the heavens. But this Augustan peace came at a steep price. The old freedoms of the Republic were systematically replaced with centralized control. The emperor wasn't just a leader. He was positioned as the pater patri, the father of the nation. His image, his statues were carved and placed in every corner of the vast empire, a constant reminder of who was in charge. The army, once loyal to the idea of Rome, now swore a personal oath of fealty, not to the state, but directly to the emperor. Propaganda became an art form. The state mastered the formula of bread and circuses, providing free food and spectacular, often violent, entertainment to keep the masses distracted and content. While the population roared for gladiators in the Colosseum, a deep-seated corruption festered behind the opulent doors of the imperial palace. Rome had perfected a dangerous equation for control. maintained power through a combination of mass distraction and underlying fear. This concentration of power at the very top created a system where decay was inevitable. It started to spread downwards, like a poison seeping into the foundations of a great building. Soon, emperors like Nero and Caligula came to power, treating the entire Roman Empire as their personal playground. They were figures consumed by excess, paranoia, and a delusional belief in their own divinity. While they indulged their every whim, the empire's foundations began to crack under the strain. Inflation spiraled out of control, devaluing the currency and destabilizing the economy. The once unified Roman armies began turning on each other, with different legions backing their own generals in bloody civil wars for the imperial throne. Corruption was no longer the exception. It had become the system itself. From the tax collector in a distant province to the highest officials in the capital, everyone was looking out for themselves. The empire had simply become too vast, too complex, and far too dependent on fear to hold itself together. And as history repeatedly shows, fear is a very weak glue for sustaining a civilization. By the 5th century CE, the Western Roman Empire finally collapsed. It wasn't just from the pressure of outside invasions, as is often taught. The barbarians at the gates were merely pushing on a structure that was already rotten from the inside out. The empire fell because the corruption that had been growing for centuries had finally hollowed it out completely, leaving an empty shell. But here's the fascinating paradox. Rome never truly died. Its legacy is all around us. Its incredible architecture inspired the masterworks of the Renaissance. Its sophisticated legal principles formed the bedrock of many modern governments. And its political playbook, the clever manipulation of power, the use of propaganda, the management of public opinion, still echoes in the corridors of power today. You can see its reflection in modern cityscapes, in the architecture of our parliaments and skyscrapers, in the organization of armies. This is because Rome was not just an empire of stone and mortar. It was an idea. A powerful, complex, and enduring idea. And ideas, both the great and the terrible, never really disappear. The Roman Empire remains one of humanity's greatest and most enduring paradoxes. It is a civilization that, in a way, achieved a form of immortality precisely by showing us how even the mightiest empires can fall from within. As you look at the world today, what lessons do you think modern powers can learn from Rome's spectacular rise and devastating fall? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey into the past, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more.